On June 26th of this year, our nation celebrated a major historical leap. The freedom for all people to marry became officially legal. Social media sites were booming with rejoice around the country. But what events led up to this monumental decision? Here's a brief history of exactly what happened. It all started on October 10, 1972, when the U.S. Supreme Court dismissed Baker v. Nelson involving a Minnesota same-sex couple's denial of a marriage license. A few months later, Maryland becomes the first state to pass a statute banning the marriage between same-sex couples. Later that year, the Kentucky Court of Appeals rules same-sex couples may not marry in Jones v. Hallahan. In May of 1974, John Singer and Paul Barwick are denied a case by the Court of Appeals of Washington when they attempt to challenge the denial of the freedom to marry to same-sex couples. About a year later in Boulder, Colorado, a county clerk by the name of Clayla Rorix issues 6 marriage licenses to same-sex couples, explaining that she found nothing in Colorado law prohibiting her from doing this. One of the couples, Richard Adams and Tony Sullivan, due to immigration issues, end up taking their petition to federal court, becoming the first federal lawsuit seeking the freedom to marry for same-sex couples. The court rules that Colorado law only recognized marriage between different sex couples, and in 1982, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed. On September 21, 1996, President Bill Clinton signs the Defense of Marriage Act, also known as DOMA, which mandates unequal treatment of legally married same-sex couples, selectively depriving them of protections and responsibilities that marriage provides at the federal level. On September 22, 1999, California becomes the first state to create a domestic partnership statute, allowing same-sex couples to receive some of the protections afforded by marriage. About 2 months later, Vermont establishes civil unions. This allows same-sex couples more freedoms than they previously had, but still falling short of constitutional equality. This law goes into effect on July 1, 2000. On November 7th of that year, anti-gay forces in Nebraska push through and constitutionally prohibit the state from respecting any form of family status or recognition for same-sex couples. Early in 2003, Evan Wolfson founds Freedom to Marry, the campaign to win marriage nationwide. Later that year, Massachusetts Supreme Court rules that the state constitution mandates the freedom to marry for same-sex couples, which is reaffirmed 3 months later, stating that only marriage sufficiently protects same-sex couples. In May of 2004, they become the first state in the U.S. to allow same-sex couples the freedom of marriage. In November of that year, anti-gay forces in 11 states marshaled by Karl Rove pushed through constitution amendments to deny same-sex couples the freedom to marry. On September 6, 2005, the California legislature passes a landmark bill to allow freedom to marry. The bill is vetoed soon after by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, passed again, and then vetoed once more. In 2006, New Jersey legislature settles for the creation of a separate and lesser mechanism of civil union. A month later, anti-gay activists continue to pass constitutional amendments denying same-sex couples the freedom to marry in 7 more states. Within the next 3 years, other states begin to put civil unions into effect, such as Maryland, Nevada, and Wisconsin. On February 23, 2011, President Barack Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder declare that because it is indefensible under the constitutional command of equal protection, the administration will no longer defend DOMA. In May of that year, the Respect for Marriage Act, which would overturn DOMA, is introduced. A year later, President Obama becomes the first sitting president in the U.S. to publicly announce support for freedom to marry. Later that month, the NAACP, NCLR, and the LULAC organizations join in the fight to support all families and the freedom to marry for all. On September 4, 2012, the Democratic Party becomes the first major U.S. political party in history to officially endorse the freedom to marry in their national party platform. By October 2014, 30 states have issued the freedom to marry to same-sex couples.
We're here hoping that the Supreme Court will decide to make our marriage legal.
Ayes 33, nays 29.
I think it's pretty clear from the history that there was some amount of controversy over this issue. Let's take a look at both sides of the argument so we can get a feel for where people were coming from.
There's no such thing as a perfect law. There's no such thing, there's amendments to the Constitution for a reason, right? It had to be amended,
Exercise by homosexual couples of the right to marry detracts not one iota from the rights of heterosexual couples to marry.
There's no evidence that allowing gay couples to wed has any effect on heterosexual marriages.
Can you say that you're treating gay couples fairly if you're denying them access to marriage? Now, if homosexual marriages were legalized, I think that both of us and many people perhaps in the audience tonight would be able to participate in the community in a very full and complete way if we felt that the law was on our side.
If you don't have the laws in place, then the bigger picture will suffer.
The right of the pursuit of happiness to all of its citizens.
They've shown that they have the same capacities and need as other families for love and support.
There is no difference in the parenting abilities of gay and non-gay parents.
To extend the definition of the family to include gay couples in no way endangers or diminishes the institution of the family.
A fundamental right to marriage claim, which is to say, shouldn't all Americans have the right to marry the person that they love?
That gives them a degree of legitimacy and support that civil unions and domestic partnerships, which are each a separate and new status under the law, simply cannot confer.
There are several legal kinds of options that heterosexual couples have that should be extended to homosexual couples.
Denying marriage or denying the marriage benefits to same-sex couples has nothing to do with whether heterosexual couples procreate accidentally or whether they take responsibility for their children.
In fact, in the states and countries where same-sex couples have been allowed to marry, there's been no harmful effect on marriage rates, divorce rates, or out-of-wedlock childbirths.
So it's an excuse to discriminate against the LGBT community.
Well, a huge amount is at stake with respect to the equality and the equal treatment of same-sex couples under the Constitution.
The bottom line is, marriage is fundamental in the formation of personal relationships and families, for gay people just as for straight people. So the government shouldn't limit their freedom to marry.
But that the union of male and female is so fundamental to society that constitutes a fundamental right.
Marriage has always been the covenant between a man and a woman. That's how children come into the world. That's how families are formed.
We recognize and we reward marriage precisely because it is the heterosexual family that produces and conditions the children that preserve and propagate the race.
That marriage should be reserved to different sex couples because different sex couples can procreate accidentally.
As I see it, the heterosexual family is the fundamental institution by which society ensures the propagation and survival of the race, the human race.
A child who lives in a same-sex union environment is never going to have his biological mother or father. He will always be missing a mother or father role model.
The union of a man and a woman, whether or not a child results, every one of those unions protects children by preventing children from being born in unmarried households.
Same-sex marriage and parenting withholds either a mother or father from a child while telling him or her that it doesn't matter, that it's all the same, but it's not. A lot of your kids are hurting.
Through this, we can see that the homosexual movement downgrades and discards motherhood and fatherhood as something necessary for a child, even when children themselves naturally crave for a mother or father.
And I was an unwed mother for 10 years, so I know a lot about the special challenges children face under those circumstances.
My father's absence created a huge hole in me, and I ached every day for a dad. I loved my mom's partner, but another mom could never have replaced the father I lost.
We think marriage is the union of husband and wife for a reason. These are the only unions that make new life and connect children in love to their mother and father.
It obscures basic moral values, devalues natural marriage, and weakens public morality.
Same-sex marriages constitute civil silliness, not civil rights. We urge you to vote no. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simon.
I'm sure you all have your opinions on the issue of same-sex marriage, but regardless of where you stand, we've witnessed a major historical event with its legalization in the United States. With decisions like these, it gives me hope for the future, and I, for one, am excited to see what comes next.